We are embarking upon a very long journey into the stock market. I will be tackling two broad topics. The first is an introduction to the stock market. The stock market being one of the most misunderstood avenues of investment. I would like you to possess genuine knowledge about what it is, how to use it, and perhaps more important, what are the pitfalls that await you when you embark upon stock market investing. The second presentation will be a guide to equity investment, or we call it an equity investment model for the common investor. How a normal person with no knowledge of investment or finance can still invest very successfully and in a stress-free manner in the stock market. That will of course be later, but today we are going to look at the stock market from a very basic introductory point of view. When we talk about the stock market with particular reference to the Indian stock market, the stock market is not some magical mechanism where stock prices fluctuate because they have no other work to do. The stock market is one of the many components of what is called the securities market. Every country which has a market-oriented economy would be having a securities market, and India is no exception. So the stock market in India is a part of the larger Indian securities market, and this whole securities market is part of the economy. To that extent, economics is very important. Let us first start by understanding where in the economic scheme of things the stock market fits. So if we start with the argument that above everything is the stock market, the economy, one important part of economics is finance, and one important part of finance is investment. From here, things get a little more complicated because investment can be of two types. You can have investment that can be traded, bought or sold, and investment that cannot be traded, non-tradable investments. When we talk about non-tradable investments, the most common example would be the bank deposit. It cannot be bought or sold. If at all you need to encash it, you can liquidate it by all means, but only by going back to the bank. You cannot sell it in a market to somebody else. When we talk about tradable investments, where the common investor is concerned, the normal investor is concerned, there are two main asset classes. The first is equity, the second is debt. When we talk about equity and debt, why we call them two different asset classes is because there is virtually no resemblance between the two, except that both of them provide investment opportunities. When we talk about equity, we approach equity, or we at least should approach equity, from the point of view of a business. Because equity is not a get-rich-quick scheme, it is not a scheme where you can gamble, but it is an avenue of investment that gives you the opportunity to be part owners of a business. And that is only the starting point. You are part owners of the business with one or two privileges. The privilege is you can be a part owner of many businesses. You need not restrict yourself to just one business. You can be a part owner of competing businesses. This fact is lost on many. If you are a director of Infosys Technologies, ethics would prevent you also from sitting on the board of, say, Wipro or TCS. Why? There is a clear conflict of interest. You are supposed to look after the interests of the company on whose board of directors you sit. You can be on the board of directors of another totally different company, like Tata Motors. That has nothing to do with technology. That is fine. But you cannot be a director on the board of another competing company in the software space. Let us now examine your privilege as an investor. As an investor, you may decide to have a diversified portfolio of 60 stocks, and you decide to reserve a certain portion for, let's say, 6 stocks, 10% of your portfolio for technology or software stocks. You can buy certain stocks of Infosys, you can buy certain stocks of Wipro, you can buy certain stocks of TCS, you can buy certain stocks of HCL Technology. No conflict of interest. This is a point that very few investors appreciate. You can be the shareholder of competing, conflicting businesses. That is your privilege. And that the underlying principle there is the principle of diversification. Second privilege that you have is your liability is limited to your investment in the stock market. Nobody can ask you to cough up anything more than what you have invested, provided the shares that you are buying are fully paid shares. If they are not fully paid, the money that can be called up later in case it is required, you may be liable for, but nothing more than that. And let me tell you that almost all leading companies, almost all blue chips, say in the BSE or NSE 200 indices, virtually all of them, their shares are fully paid. The implication is, even if the company goes bankrupt, having gone bankrupt, the company's assets are insufficient to pay off its liabilities. So the company actually defaults. You as a shareholder cannot or are not personally liable for the company's debts. Your liability is over once you have put in your money. So this is the ownership privilege or privileges that you enjoy when you are a shareholder of a company. This is an ownership interest. You have an owner and a company that is owned. Of course, you are not the sole owner. You are a joint owner with a number of other people. Now we come to the debt asset class. And when we talk about the debt asset class, we are talking about here the relationship being totally different. It is now a lender-borrower relationship. You lend money, somebody borrows money. Many of us have heard of the Public Provident Fund account, PPF. You are the lender. You may think I am an investor in the PPF. Actually, you are lending money to the government of India. You may think I have a bank deposit of 2 lakh rupees in a certain bank. You may call it a deposit, but you have lent money. The bank is the borrower. It is a lender-borrower relationship. For the money borrowed from you, the bank pays you a certain interest. So it's very important to understand the two main asset classes, equity and debt, one having an ownership interest, one having a lending interest or a lender-borrower relationship. It's very important to understand this. And these are the two main asset classes that a normal investor would need when embarking upon investment. These two asset classes are mainly traded in 3 different markets: the primary market, the secondary market, the hybrid markets. Primary school, something that happens first. When a corporation, a company, an institution first issues securities, let it be shares, let it be bonds, debentures, first issues these securities to the public. The relationship is between the investor who fills up the application form and subscribes and the institution that issues the shares or the securities. This is the primary activity. Moment the issue is over, this primary chapter is closed. If you further want to sell the shares, you cannot go back to the issuer and said, listen, you gave me the securities, now you take them back, like a bank deposit. The bank gave me the FDR, or I gave money and for that I got an FDR. Now I want my money back, take your FDR, give me the money. That kind of a relationship does not work in markets. There are rare cases where the issuer may offer a partial or complete buyback, but they are rare. If you want to sell securities that you have acquired in the primary market. You have to sell these securities in the secondary market. And secondary market exists both for stocks as well as bonds, both for equity as well as debt. There are also hybrid markets. You want to invest, let's say, in the stock market. You are not confident of doing so on your own. So instead of going directly, you make use of an indirect route. You entrust your money to somebody called a portfolio manager or a mutual fund. And having entrusted the money to the portfolio manager or mutual fund, you are able to approach the secondary market not directly but through the hybrid markets. So when you are an investor, generally you will be doing very few things. You will decide whether to have your investments here, or ideally in a mix of both. At certain points of time, you may subscribe to shares in the or bonds in the new issues market. At other times, you may acquire securities in the secondary market. At other times, you may make use of instruments like mutual funds to invest in either this or this. At this very point, let us understand that in the modern era, as an investor, there is a lot of power in your hands. You have got a lot of choices. You have got choices at the micro level. Which equity fund to choose? Is A better or B better or C better? Which stocks to choose? How much to diversify? These are all choices you have. You also have choices at the macro level where you can invest in this market or in both. And once you have chosen your asset class, you also have choices in each of the asset classes, whether to go through the primary, secondary, hybrid, here too primary, secondary, hybrid, or a mixture of all of these. That's what most people do. Depending on the circumstances and the kind of securities that are being offered, and also very importantly, the situation of the individual investor, you will decide how to pick and choose and construct a proper investment portfolio. And those of you who have been following our talks in these series on personal financial planning, on personal investment planning, you will already have a reasonably good idea of how to construct a portfolio, how to plan for objective-based investments. So with this introduction, let us move a little further, and we will have a very quick look at the primary market. Now, when we talk about the primary market, companies generally need capital or money for three purposes. The first is to start a business. The second is, having started a business, to expand the business. And the third is to start a brand new business unrelated to the first, called diversification. When Mangalore Refinery and Petrochemicals started, maybe more than 2 decades ago, it needed a certain amount of capital just to start. A refinery is very capital intensive. Thousands of crores of rupees have to be poured into machinery, acquisition of land, all the basic infrastructure in place, paying consultants, project reports. If I'm not mistaken, they started with a refining capacity of 3 million tons per annum. Along the way, having collected money for starting, they decided to expand. In fact, to the best of my knowledge, there were 2 expansions. The first expansion was from 3 million tons per annum to 9 million tons per annum. And the second expansion was from 9 million tons per annum to 15 million tons per annum. And today, of course, it is one of the bigger, if not the biggest, definitely not the biggest, but certainly one of the bigger refineries in India. Now, supposing the same MRPL said, okay, we are refining, and our refined product is being transported from our plant in 2 ways. One is by a number of trucks. The second is by sea, by ships. Also, crude oil comes to us via ships. So doesn't it make sense for us also to own a few ships, to start a shipping operation, or maybe decide a transport operation by road? Or imagine if they are also transporting it by rail. Today the railways are fully in the hands of the central government. But at the moment we have quite a dynamic railways minister. If one day there is an opportunity for private participation in the railways, maybe MRPL would like to own some goods wagons or even a goods train or two. Now they are a refining company, but the moment they decide to step away from refining and into things like transport, you are diversifying. So for these three reasons, companies require capital. And for these three reasons, because they require capital, they may come out with a public issue. Now we come to the investment portion of the new issues market. And the first point that I want to make is, as a rule, avoid initial public offers or new offers of securities, because blind investing in IPOs is investment without a strategy. This is very important and we have to understand this perfectly. Stockbrokers will try to sell trading in the stock market. Merchant bankers and others will always try to sell you IPOs or initial public offers, new issues of securities. You have to understand the game that is being played. Let us take a stock market investor. A stock market investor has a number of choices of securities. Something like 2,500 to 3,000 shares may be traded on the Indian stock markets every day. Lot of them will have very poor liquidity. It may be difficult to buy or sell 500 or 1,000 shares, but you certainly have the top 50 or the top 100 companies. Okay, you want to go beyond that, you have the Bombay Stock Exchange or National Stock Exchange 200 share index. That gives you more than enough choice. You can pick and choose. Do I want a Larsen & Toubro in my portfolio? Do I want a GlaxoSmithKline in my portfolio? Do I want a, let's say, ITC in my portfolio? The shares are always available. They are traded. They are the blue chips. You can pick and choose what you want to include in your portfolio. But when you come to the new issues market, you will suddenly find that you have no such choice. A company will decide when it wants to approach the public for either a new issue of capital or a subsequent fresh issue of capital. And having decided that, it will offer the shares for a limited period at a point of its choosing. So at this very level, it is important to understand the game that is played in IPOs. When we talk about IPOs, we have an issuer, as the term is, or the company that issues, and then we have the investor. And in the middle there is another entity which looks after the entire issue, called the merchant banker. The issuer engages the services of a merchant banker. The merchant banker does all the processes, the due diligence, the SEBI and company law requirements, compliance, all those things, and then looks after the marketing of the issue to the investors, not only the marketing. After that, there is post-marketing formalities, listing on the stock exchanges, submitting compliance reports. If somebody has applied for a greater number of securities, lesser number have been allotted, the excess money has to be refunded to them. If there are any complaints from investors, they have to be redressed. All those things are looked after by the merchant bankers, for which they get paid. Now, this is the scenario in the IPO market. Now let us go one step deeper. For the moment, we will forget about this intermediary and look at the issuer who is issuing shares to the general body of investors. What is this issue? The issue, as you say, I am issuing something, means I am granting something or delivering something, and I am not giving it free. Let's understand that. It is for money, which means that the issuer is the seller and the investors are the buyers, and the merchant bankers in between become the agents or the intermediaries. The moment you understand this, you will get all the insights you need into IPOs and whether it is advisable to invest in them or not. You have a seller, you have a buyer. If you are a seller of anything, do you want a higher price or a lower price? You don't have to think. If you have land and the land is going at 10 lakh rupees per cent, and that was the high it touched, subsequently the real estate boom ends, as is now the case where the real estate market is in the doldrums, and the price has dropped to 8 lakh rupees per cent. You still sit dreaming of the time it was 10 lakhs. As a seller, you want the highest price. As a buyer, you want the lowest price. When will companies come out with public issues? Understand that the companies are the sellers, the issuers are the sellers. They are not going to come down when the stock market is flat down on its back at low prices when it is good for the buyers to buy. The companies are going to come out with public issues whenever the markets are high. And the power to issue shares is not with the buyers. These people can pick and choose how much to issue, for what purpose, and most importantly, when. You can be absolutely sure that the vast overwhelming majority of public issues will be only when the markets are high, which means a good time for the seller to sell. But if you are the investor, is it a good time for you to buy? And the obvious answer is no. So this is the first argument against blind investing in IPOs. The second argument is, a particular company or a small group of companies will decide when they want to sell shares to you. The merchant bankers also help them fix the prices. You do not have a wide choice. It is only those companies that are coming out with the IPOs, you have a choice of either investing or not investing. You cannot have the choice of asking a particular company to come out with an IPO. That's a company decision. Next point. The issuer engages the merchant banker. The merchant banker does not do the work free. There are fees to be paid, and there are commissions to be paid when the issue is sold. Commissions also depend upon the size of the issue, upon the price of the issue. In short, higher the price, greater the fees and the commissions. So when do you think the merchant bankers will like to come out with public issues? Once again, when the markets are high. One more point. Who pays the fees to the merchant bankers? You as an investor or the company? It's the issuer. When I receive fees from someone, whose interests do you think I am going to protect? Obviously, the person from whom I am earning money. So very often, all these considerations act against the interest of the investor. So you have to be very, very careful about IPOs. Most IPOs are bunched together in a bull market when it is good for the to sell their shares rather than for the investors to buy them. I also told you about this conflict of interest. Merchant bankers are paid by promoters, not by investors. If at all there is one reasonably good parameter by which you can judge, don't blindly go in for a totally new IPO, but if some leading business house which has a track record of constantly rewarding investors. If such a business house is coming out with one or two good public issues, and if you think that these particular companies in the public issue there is some price advantage, and if I get some shares it can be added to my diversified portfolio, then only taking into account the track record of the promoters, you may decide to go in for a IPO. But if you do not want to do it and avoid IPOs totally, it is absolutely fine. Those of you who have been following my talks will know who Benjamin Graham is. He is the person who taught Warren Buffett the basics of investing. And his book, The Intelligent Investor, is absolutely the only book on the stock market worth reading. And here is an excerpt from this book, The Intelligent Investor, about IPOs. Benjamin Graham says, investors should be very careful of new issues, which means simply that these should be subjected to careful examination and unusually severe tests before they are purchased. He is giving you two warnings. One, you should carefully examine. Second, the language is rather strong. Not severe itself is a strong word. Unusually severe tests they should be subjected to before you take a decision to purchase or not. And he says there are two reasons for this double caveat. A caveat is a warning. So there are two reasons for this double warning. The first is that new issues have special salesmanship behind them, which calls therefore for a special degree of sales resistance. This is a lesson not just for IPOs, it's a lesson for life. The moment somebody is trying to do some high pressure selling, your resistance to that selling also should be equally high pressure. This is very important to understand. So high pressure selling means high pressure resistance. The second is that most new issues are sold under favorable market conditions, which means favorable for the seller and consequently less favorable for the buyer. Now all these warnings that I gave you about IPOs are beautifully captured in this one small little passage from Benjamin Graham. The game is there is a seller, there is a buyer. A lot of control about when to sell is in the hands of the seller, not the buyer. The intermediary between the seller and the buyer is paid, remunerated by the seller. In short, when you look at the IPO market, everything is loaded against the investor. And if you agree with me on that point, then the lesson to be learnt is very simple. As far as possible, avoid IPOs. Let institutions, let other people who have done their due diligence, let them subscribe. Individual investors, be careful. When you come to the stock market, you can buy when the markets are low, you can buy when the markets are high. You can pick and choose. Now, the playing field is more level. Here it is against you, it is not a level playing field. Jason Zweig, one of the greatest writers in the modern era on finance and investment, he says, weighing the evidence objectively, the intelligent investor should conclude that IPO does not stand only for initial public offering. More accurately, it is also shorthand for it's probably overpriced, imaginary profits only, insiders' private opportunity, or idiotic, preposterous, and outrageous. So he really destroys this whole concept of IPO investing. And Burton Malkiel says, in measuring all IPOs 5 years after their initial issuance, researchers have found that IPOs underperform the total stock market by about 4 percentage points per year. What happens in the IPO thing is, 10 IPOs come out. 7 or 8 of them are trading below their issue price, where investors are suffering losses. These generally do not make the big headlines. Maybe there will be a mention of them in the media. But if there is 1 or 2 out of 10 where there were good profits, those will be highlighted. As a result of which, we get fooled into believing that IPOs are a very good way to enter the stock market. If you want to know whether they are a really good way of entering into the stock market, you should not look at the 1 or 2 out of 10 where profits were made. You have to take all the IPOs issued in a particular market, say India, over the last, let's say 5 years, then see what their returns were 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years or 5 years down the line. Then do a comparative analysis. The story will not at all be flattering. So this is something very important to understand about the IPO markets or the new issues markets.